You knew where the referral sources were coming. Then you built a model around that. It's like most practice owners had to start with a lot of variables. Like, hey, if I get this many visits, I will get that. But in your case, you kind of started the other way probably, where it's like, you kind of know how many patients the upstream providers are seeing. So you can start to like cut more and more of those variables out. And I think it's so fascinating. Kick it.
Welcome to Strata Stories. My name is Thomas Schreiber. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Strata PT. Strata PT is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. On today's episode, Paul Singh, the CEO of Strata PT, talks with Eric Fiedler, who is the clinic director and physical therapist at Raleigh Bone and Joint Surgery Clinic. Paul and Eric talk through operating a clinic that has direct partnerships with orthopedic specialists, how to provide efficacy measures to payers and legislators, new ways younger PTs are trying to have a seat at the primary care table, and why he chose not to be a cash pay model. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo. Now, without further delay, here's today's episode.
You're right. It is kind of unique what you're doing. So why don't you, I don't want to steal your thunder. People will read about you on LinkedIn, but give us Eric's version of what your clinic is and what your business is, and then let's dig in from there.
Yeah, so we started this about 2 years ago. I worked in a smaller practice when I first got out of school, and then I worked with Wake Orthopedics, which is part of the Wake Med hospital system, for 6.5 years. And then I got this opportunity to open up shop for a group of physicians who had not had a PT practice before, and came in literally from the ground up and just built it completely from the ground up. And there was basically nothing, and I didn't know much of anything, and I've learned and continued to learn along the way. Knew nothing about billing, knew nothing about marketing.
I think you're being really humble though, because I think on the outside, and again, I'm on the outside, you and I don't have a business relationship, right? So, but from the outside, I think the thing that is super unique is it's almost like you've built this in-house clinic for PTs within the medical system. Like I know that's a mouthful, but it's like, I think a lot of the reason I say this is that a lot of other practice owners or clinic owners or whatever that I meet, they're starting a new freestanding thing, and it's almost like they start with credentialing and leases and all that stuff, and then once they're all done, they put the shingle out front and they say, okay, let's figure out how to get clients. From the outside, you kind of did it. Your practice is kind of your business is kind of like the other way, where it's like you kind of have these in-house. So can you just talk about that? Because I think you're being super humble, which is super cool, but I'm curious if you can share anything about like how your model works, because I think that's the really, really interesting part.
Sure. I mean, so they reached out to me. So that was the first thing they didn't reach out to me. They put an ad up on LinkedIn, on Indeed. And I just was like, all right, it sounds interesting. Let me go talk to them. And from the startup, they just kind of said, hey, this can be your vision, essentially how you want to, obviously you want to be profitable. And the way that they did it is they actually hired a consultant that they knew first, who was a PT. She was already starting her own cash-based business. And she kind of got them rolling on the information and just the understanding that unless you made this super, super, super high volume, which was not the point of it, it wasn't going to be this huge cash cow. It was not going to be, this massive revenue generator that I think some of them were thinking of initially. And so it just kind of set the expectation. And then when I came in, we started off literally they had already started the credentialing process, which was helpful. So we had to get them all the taxonomy and all that stuff that we needed to. And then from there, it was literally, here's your space. Here's some ideas of things that you can order. Go. We had to literally build the templates up so we're on Epic system. We work on the system with Duke, UNC, Wake Med, but we're not part of them. And so we had to literally go in, and I had to have meetings with the building teams and try to say, hey, this is what I want this to look like. This is what I need to be seen. And every time there wasn't something there, we had to go back. And obviously I didn't fix that part. And then, getting the signs and getting the equipment, setting up the equipment, saying what needs to be done in the room, and then starting to hire staff. And it literally they kind of let me do it however I wanted to, which was really, really great. And, I had the backing of the whole practice. So, financially, I didn't have to put the money down, which was nice. But I also tried really hard to keep costs really, really low as early as I could, because I knew it was going to take a bit to kind of get into things. So,
well, and I hope you don't, this is like, I'm going to sound like a second grader here, but for your practice, um, does it only see patients from these particular doctors, or could I just walk in like as a
Yeah, so I made sure so obviously we're here mostly for our physicians, but I wanted to make sure that anyone could come see us. So, I have a specific specialty that not a lot of people have, and we kind of wanted to just open it up to literally anyone. That was why I wanted to get the Google page running right away. Because initially we didn't even have one because we were part of their own, and I said no, we need a separate telephone line, we need a separate Google page, we need to just be out there in the community, get our views up and things like that. So we see some direct access as well, which is nice, which I insisted on.
obviously don't share anything you can't or won't want to share, but like I think from the outside makes total sense. You've got these doctors inside the medical system that need to be able to send a patient somewhere else, and where better to send them to the place that you trust, because you also have an economic piece or incentive to make sure that practice is good. So I mean, at face value, it makes sense, right?
And it's just nice because and again, I based a lot of this off of me working with Wake Ortho, because prior to that I just worked in an independent place, and working with the docs, I think it gets vilified a lot in our profession because of there can be some serious mills and for profit stuff that goes on, which can be a little icky. But when it's done really really well and it's just about quality, it's really awesome how well things can work with seamless care. you know Understanding the protocols, setting up some of the protocols with the docs, having this ability to just go talk to them whenever you need them. You have a problem, walk back or text them. And if they're not there, find one of the partners. Just always having this way of kind of keeping it um, high value and team oriented.
I got to say, I've been doing this for a while now, and I can't recall the last time I met somebody with a model like this. Is it just that I haven't met the right people yet, or do you feel like you've built this practice in a certain way where like you're like, gosh, I wonder why more people don't do this in other places in the country?
It's probably more to do with the fact that most physicians have already had their practices from the ground up with physical therapy. So, look at the bigger corporations like Emerge Ortho always has PT there. Some of the bigger ortho practices here, Raleigh Ortho has their own PTs. And I think it's unique to this area because it's really hard for independent practitioners and ortho to come in and just make a name because it's just so saturated. I mean, everyone wants to be here. There's three big hospital systems, and there's what, five, six PT schools that all feed right into Raleigh. So it was just an interesting opportunity. I haven't even thought of it like that. Honestly, it was just like, oh, this is fun.
Well, like, so you kind of mentioned that you do see some direct access, but like, and again, you can take a pass on this if if you don't want to talk about this, but so like if I was a fly on the wall there at the clinic with you, um, do, do you guys spend time thinking about like marketing, or because again, you have like sort of, you have it's like the referral sources are financially incentivized to help. So it's almost like in a perfect world, it's almost like you don't have to do anything there. So do you guys do stuff there? Like,
For us, and so this is it's a pretty unique practice. I think they do not see a lot of volume. So as far as orthodox go, they can go really really heavy on their volume, but this is very much almost concierge type. What's something I didn't know coming in is that they pull from the area a whole lot. So all around, people travel hours and hours and hours to come see these docs sometimes. And so right off the bat, 20-30% won't even be able to come to us. So right off the bat there, and then we came in and they were really well established with other PT practices because they've been around. It was one of the oldest practices in Raleigh. So they were already well established relationships with some of the other practices. So I had to be diligent and making sure that obviously they're sending to us, being wary of star clause. Obviously, we don't want to make sure we're giving people options. You don't want to do anything like that. And then just kind of working around to primary cares. We also have three other physician practices in the building, which I made a point to immediately go out to and introduce myself to.
got it. Yep. Okay. Okay. So it's like okay. So just, all right. I didn't mean to interrupt, but like the way you're talking about it is like, it's like every other practice, not in a bad way, but in the sense that like, if somebody, because I made this mistake as I was kind of understanding your business, I'm like, oh, well, he's got the referral sources locked in, but then you make a good point. Like, especially with like the healthcare systems there and the region you're in, like the people that are driving out from some rural area are not going to drive to you for 6 visits. So yeah, in many ways, you have the same sort of marketing um, need for new patients and stuff like that than any other practice does. So that's actually neat. That's super cool.
We've gone out and I just go to local places, and I'm like, I'm a tennis specialist, so I want to go talk to people at Raleigh Tennis Association. Whitney is one of my PTs as well. She works with soccer players. She's a former college soccer player, and sometimes we'll just go out and I'll just go out and talk to people and try to set up some lunches, try to stay under budget and things like that. I try to make sure I'm not overpressing too much. We want to have room for our PTs to see our patients as well. But it's always on the back of my mind. How can we generate more people coming in the office?
That's cool. Would you say like cash pay versus insurance, like percentage wise? Are you like
I mean, we're
heavier on
pretty much
cash versus?
100% insurance. I mean, we do
Yeah.
have
Okay.
a few cash just because it's cheaper for them.
Yeah.
Don't have a lot
Yeah.
of cash business,
Yeah.
especially trying to keep our model kind of keeping things low and
Yeah.
slow.
Yeah.
Thought about different cash options for people, but haven't quite broached that yet.
I'll probably lose some friends here on this one, but I just I just came back from PPS. If went down there, go check that out, and it's it's so fascinating to me, like how fashionable it has become for a bunch of consultants to show up and be like, everything should be cash pay, and it's like, well, hang on. If you're in Manhattan and people have got loads of money to spend, sure, but I don't know. I feel like I'm in an okay area in Virginia, and I still can't imagine people paying cash for this stuff. So
And I think I thought about that at multiple points throughout my career. I'm like, hey, which should I go out on my own? But I think about it. I'm married. I have 2 little kids. I mean, we're usually pretty strapped, and oftentimes more strapped than not. And trying to think of a time in my life where I could push out $150, regardless of the quality. I don't have it, and even if it is just going on a credit card and then getting reimbursed back to 80% because of co-insurance, I see the model, and I think in certain areas you can absolutely do it. I think Raleigh actually you probably could, but it's also so saturated it's hard to.
it's a different sales process too.
It
Like even
is
if
very
all
much
the
so.
other things were true, it's just a different way to sell.
Yeah, and I have a
Um,
hard time. I would have a hard time with it too because I'm a slightly different type of PT. And I think within the realm of PT, there are a lot of different contingents. There's the really manual heavy people, and then there's the really strength and conditioning only people. And I tend to lend myself a little more towards strength and conditioning a little bit more heavily. I still am a manual therapist and I do it. But I think when you get into that cash business, sometimes people really want to have significant amount of hands on, and one that's tiring for me. Hurts my hands, and I'm probably not gonna be able to spend 20-30 minutes doing joint mobilizations and doing soft tissue work and stuff like that. So for me, the model in which someone comes in and I can do that as necessary, but really focus in on kind of what I know to work for me works better in a non-cash based model for me.
and so I think you alluded to this when you were talking about your practice, but so well, you said you're mostly insurance, and then you alluded to the idea that you had to figure out a bunch of stuff. I imagine some of that had to do with like billing and reimbursement and stuff like that. Like,
Still learning every single day about something new
that's
popping up,
right.
and
Yeah.
oh, this
Yeah.
requires authorization, this doesn't. I
Right.
spent a lot of time on that actually. I had them print out EOBs for me for like 5 to 10 of them every couple of weeks, and I was like, all right, what did that code reimburse for? What's that contracted to? I'm like, oh, okay, like that one doesn't reimburse very well. Why are we using that code? Why didn't that get reimbursed? And oh, you didn't put X, Y, or Z in. So yeah,
That's right. Yeah, it's like this cat and mouse game, right? It's like the I don't know. Well, anyway, that's interesting. Like like I said, I didn't come from PT or healthcare or whatever, and as a consumer, like just an average dad or whatever, I don't think about that. I just like, oh, my kid's sick. I'm going to go to the doctor. My knee hurts. I'm going to go to the PT, and I never until I got here to Strata years ago. I just never thought about it. I just I don't know. I thought I don't know what I thought, but I just imagined like when I go to Starbucks and I run my credit card, I just figured they get their money the next day and I got my coffee. And then it was like, wait, that's how this works in healthcare? Holy cow.
for younger PTs who have no concept of the business. And I think this is kind of this divide we have is that obviously we want to have a seat at the table. We have the doctorate degree now. We want to be treated as such. And then we have this concept of, the overhead and how it's actually the margins are a lot thinner than you think, even if you're seeing a fair amount of patients, unless you're seeing a ton.
Yeah, so this is an interesting topic actually, because on paper, most therapy practices, especially the ones that accept insurance, on paper, they're probably profitable to the tune of like 20-25% on paper. And then the reason it sort of just gets whittled away, just to oversimplify it, is because all those little inefficiencies in the reimbursement process, all those little details, like what you just said, like, hey, why'd this get kicked back? It's like each of those little things on their own is probably like a couple bucks here and there. But then when you zoom out and you look at the month's revenue and you're like, what happened? Why am I in a single digit percentage or whatever? It's not for lack of effort. It's the leakage that occurs. I have this theory, which again I might lose some friends on, but I have this theory that the payments infrastructure of PT, OT, and speech, and frankly of broader healthcare practices, but the payments infrastructure for like small to mid-sized practices like you guys, I think that payments infrastructure in 2024 looks a lot like the broader technology industry 30 years ago. I think people forget, like, today you and I can open up CNN or whichever news site you want, and we can see like a live ticker of what the New York Stock Exchange values are. But people forget that, like, up until the late 80s, the market would shut down on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays because somebody had to process all the paper. And that inefficiency made for a lot of like middlemen that made a lot of money. But it also blocked out a lot of like smaller traders. Anyway, I don't think it'll take 30 years for this industry to get caught up, but I don't think it's going to take more than like 7.
I hope so. I mean, it would be nice. I think we have just kind of a little bit of an identity crisis where we're just not getting, we can't prove that we are as effective as we should be. And sometimes I think that's sometimes where we're in this fight. You can go to any APTA conference and know that. Just we're just in this fight with proving our efficacy and why we should be paid and reimbursed more and stuff like that. So
Yeah, this is really interesting too, because and again, I'm probably talking above my pay grade here, but I had a very direct conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, like, okay, every practice owner tells me, like, they're getting, they're like everybody will be like, oh, Medicare just cut it 3%, and or it's going to be 0 this month, and then with RVUs it's still going to be a cut, and it's like, I was talking to somebody yesterday actually, and I was like, just shoot it to me straight. Do I need to go get like to prove efficacy? Everybody tells me we got to prove efficacy. And I said to this person yesterday, I said, do I need to like go get 100 practice owners in our client base and say, give me this particular set of data and our collective power of data will give us the ability to prove this efficacy? And she goes, no, why do you think you have to do that? I was like, because I don't know what you people are saying. Everybody keeps saying it to prove efficacy. She's like, no, that's not how like the big ACOs do it. And I'm like, okay, well, talk to me like a second grader. And she's like, yeah, they just basically go buy some Medicare data from a VDRC. I was like, well, hang on, what is that? I'm writing this down. And she's like, yeah, you get all this data from these like these repositories, and then you put an analyst on it, and you say, okay, here's some data to show that patients that saw real Medicare data that's been anonymized and all that stuff. She's like, yeah, you just then pay an analyst to go in there and try to find some correlation between, hey, here's a subset of the population that um, that what do you call it, that saw outpatient PT first, and look at like now compare that against the people that went to their primary care physician first, and here's how it's better. And I was like, oh, so you're just telling me we need one company, maybe even like us, to just sponsor that? And she's like, yeah, that's all it takes. And I was like, why didn't we just say that? That's what we should say. I probably will get in trouble with this, but I'm meeting with somebody from APTA's executive team for lunch here in a week or so. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just go say this. Like, what are y'all doing over there? Shouldn't you just tell people that like we should just get somebody to just pay for this and do it? So
just
anyway, now I'm going to
it.
get canceled in the industry, and we'll see where that goes. I'm sorry, it was your episode,
I
Eric,
agree,
too,
though,
by the
I
way.
agree.
All right. So you mentioned that with your practice. So let me say this in a way. I'm going to say something that's not going to sound like a compliment, but I think what's interesting to me is a lot of times when you meet people like yourself, you're building this practice in your mind. You've been living and breathing it, so you're probably like, yeah, this is normal, this is great. But like on my end, like looking at it from the outside, it's just super unique. Like you kind of started the opposite way to most people. You knew where the referral sources were coming, then you built a model around that, and all your it's like most practice owners had to start with a lot of variables. Like, okay, if I get this many visits, I will get that. But in your case, you kind of started the other way, probably, where it's like you kind of know how many patients the upstream providers are seeing. And so you can start to like cut more and more of those variables out. And I think it's so fascinating because I just don't hear about this more often. And maybe somebody listening to this in like Wyoming can do it, or Montana can do it, or maybe they'll contact you and then you'll just do
Maybe,
it.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess now that you think about it, I've never actually heard of anyone else doing it. I've never thought twice about that because it seemed relatively straightforward to me. um,
You know, the again, coming from the tech world, one of the things we've said, okay, so there's a compliment buried in here a little bit, but it's going to take a minute to get to it. We learned as an industry a long time ago that distribution is more important than the product. So in other words, like the mainstream narrative around entrepreneurship in the tech world is like, patent the idea. It's got to be unique. That's like the mainstream narrative. But the reality, if you look at like venture returns in the tech world, is that it's the distribution model. Whoever controls the traffic, or at least gets to the source of the traffic before anybody else, they control the market. A good example, even though it's cliche, is Facebook. There's been no shortage of other people that wanted to create social networks to compete with Facebook. But the reason they continue to dominate, for better or for worse, is because 1.5 billion people log in every day, which sounds like a big number today, but you have to then put it into perspective and say, like, way back when they built something very sticky, like people wanted to use it, and they just kept growing market share and mind share. And so the compliment that's buried in here is like, that's why I find your business so interesting, is that you sort of inadvertently built kind of the way that tech companies think. Like you started with the source of patients, and then built a business around that. And it's so different than most practice owners around the country. They mean very well, but by and large, it's kind of like, I'm going to build it and then I'll figure out how to get the patients there.
it's a
It's,
lot easier. I mean, it's a lot easier from that perspective. I mean, I'm not. It's a lot less stressful in some ways because I didn't have to worry about day one where my patient's coming from. We were already setting the schedule. We were back here. We were talking to the patients because I just walked back here and they'd introduce us and like, hey, welcome right back. Like, hey, here's our PTs. Come talk to them for a second. You
oh,
want to
wait,
see
so
what
are
we're
you
going with?
guys in the same building
We
as?
are. We're actually we're behind them. Yeah. So the main clinic, which one I'm sitting in right now, you literally walk through the back door and literally right through the other door. We're right there. So we're basically attached, which is nice.
You mentioned something in passing a few minutes ago where you said you specialize in tennis, I think, and one of your other therapists specializes in soccer, I think, and stuff like that. So is that part of the specialization more related to the direct access kind of patients, or maybe not direct access, but
Not
like,
really. I mean, I don't. For me, I did something called the CTPS, which is like a certified tennis performance specialist. I played a lot of tennis growing up. I was supposed to play in college and got hurt and never got to play, and just kind of built myself around because I understand the mechanics better. So I don't really get as much direct access from that. I just kind of get word of mouth. I was working on this a little bit when I was at Wake Ortho, and then COVID happened. And that kind of fell apart, and that's just kind of where I'm going next. Because there's just again, we talk about the market. There's a ton of tennis players here, probably thousands and thousands and thousands, and not as many. There's a few guys here who really know tennis well. One or two of them actually worked on the ATP tour, so I got my work cut out for me. Um, but and it just a lot of it's word of mouth. We haven't marketed as much of it. But one unique thing we did do is this was actually to the credit of one of our physicians is we are now contracted with a local high school, and we actually go to them every Wednesday afternoon. One person goes to them, and we help out their athletic trainer. We do some diagnostics, and then that feeds back into our system as well.
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I love it, man. Like, um, yeah, it's interesting to like listen to you talk about the business, because I think you probably talk you seem like a pretty humble dude, but I think more importantly, like you've been running this business, so you're like kind of, to you're talking about it like so casually, and it's like most practice owners aren't thinking that way. They're like, yeah, I started this thing up and I go to a business lunch once a week for lead share, and that's, that's what they know, but you're kind of like sticking your neck out there, and I think that's super cool. I hope more people kind of take that to heart. I'm curious, like, in terms of like specialties. This is a weird question, but if I was like a fly on the wall and I just kind of like made some stereotypical judgments about like the average, patient that is walking through your clinics on a given week, are there like two or three specialties that you guys sort of like that I would notice? Like, is it knee replacements?
Lots
Is
of, yeah,
it,
a lot of total joints. So
yeah.
we have 8
Oh, well,
physicians.
that makes sense actually, because your name is totally okay.
Yeah, yeah, sports med kind of stuff. I'd say of the vast majority of right now we have a lot of total knees, total hips, a couple total shoulders. And then we just kind of see your general run of the mill, knee pain, hip pain, back pain. Because we have a wake, spine, and pain in this building, we actually see a lot of kind of chronic pain patients. That's kind of just by association because they're here. See a fair amount of foot and ankle from podiatry downstairs. And we've kind of talked about ways to become more niche in certain areas, looking into things like scoliosis, Schroth PT, because there's a physician down the road that's all he does. Looking into more vestibular, concussion, things like that. And I think you just kind of have to set yourself apart. But again, it's hard in this area. Everyone's got everything now.
What do you this you can take a pass on this if this is too difficult. Knowing what you know today, like 2024 Eric, uh, what do you wish you would have known when you started this thing, like that would have saved you time? Yeah, it's not a trick question. I'm genuinely curious if there's stuff like you just wish you would have, somebody would have told you when you started this thing that would have saved you some time and gotten you to this point in your career faster.
Well, that's actually hard to think about. I mean, I definitely would have liked to have known more, have a better understanding of the insurance process. That would have been helpful because that's been the bane of my existence, trying to understand. Okay, follow up now. Okay, now UHC changed the rules. Okay, now they require pre-authorization. Oh, now this one requires pre-authorization. Oh, this one's not reimbursing very well. And I had an idea of code diversification, but I had no idea why. And that would have been really really helpful coming in. And it's been pretty straightforward. There's been some challenges, um, but I think a lot of it's coming in working with a group of physicians is a different feel to it too. You have to kind of meet them where they are. Sometimes they have expectations of PT that are not consistent with how you treat, and sometimes it's just kind of forming that partnership. That was what took me the longest, was to make sure that we're all on the same page and everything's good, and kind of proving ourselves like, all right, yes, this was a good idea.
I think it's one of those things where people know this, but they don't talk about it openly enough, that like at a certain point you kind of have to recognize that it's almost like two different ball caps you got to wear, like on the clinical side versus the administrative side versus the billing side. And it's just not for everybody, It's like, but anyway, I don't want to make it. That's probably going to open up another can of worms. But yeah, it's just different, right? It's like the only industry where you're allowed to change the rules. Like on the billing side, it's like the only industry that gets away with like, hey, I can change the rules overnight, and I don't really have to tell you. Oh, but I did tell you. You just saw the denial come through. That's all, and that's how
I
we're
find
telling you.
out things from LinkedIn all the time. I'm just like perusing, like, oh, Blue Cross Blue Shield just changed this. I'm like, let me go tell my front desk. I'm like, I didn't know this. What do we have to do now? Please find out for me.
Well, I remember even like as a consumer, I know this is going to sound like ridiculous to anybody else listening that knows this stuff, but it's like I remember as a consumer, I remember so we've got 4 kids, and I remember when we were expecting one of them. I can't remember which one now, but I remember it was like midway through the year, and I think we had a certain Aetna plan at the time. I don't remember what it was, but just out of the blue, we got an email from them that didn't even look like a real email. And it was like, "Hey, by the way, your postpartum benefits have now been not modified. You don't get this." And I'm like, "What? Like, how you can change that mid-year? Like, can my payment go down mid-year too? Oh, no, your payment's locked in." I'm like, "Oh, wait, but I get less for it." it's, it's wild. So anyway, that's above my pay grade to figure out. But I just it's funny. The longer I spend more in healthcare, the more I kind of notice like stuff that's allowed to happen here that you can't get away with if you were a credit card company or a consumer internet company or whatever. So anyway, probably all stuff you guys probably deal with all day, and you kind of like have to roll your eyes at.
It's just there. It's just like it's on there. It's one of those things you just kind of have to. It just accept it. It's I can't change it. It just move on. Find ways to keep going. You can get frustrated by it, or you can just laugh it off and say, I can't do anything about it, and move on.
There's probably other ways to make money anyway, or like different areas of opportunity that you just kind of have to go forward with. When you so you guys, I think you've got a couple locations there as well now. Like, uh, like will you can take a pass if you want here, but in terms of growth and stuff like that, do you guys think about that right now, or is it really more like, hey, we just
I
need to
actually
kind of,
asked them that in my interview if they thought of it like, hey, are we going to grow? And they're
yeah,
like, probably not. Like this is
yeah,
probably where we're going to be.
yeah.
Some of the docs are towards the tail ends of their careers, maybe down the road. As some of them retire, which I don't think will be anytime soon for most of them. There's a chance that they might get a little more want to push out further into the area. But again, I think they have their market. They're so well established. And this is something I didn't consider is that they don't really have to work for the referrals in the same way that a lot of people do. They just have it and they have word of mouth. And so they're comfortable in that niche and that works really well for them.
See, I love that actually because like sometimes I'll ask that question and people I know they mean well, but they'll be like, "Oh yeah, we definitely want to grow or whatever," right? But I actually love that angle that you're talking about because what people don't talk about enough is like, hey, why not just focus on being the most profitable company? Why not focus on being that instead of like, oh, we want to like grow with 10, 15 practices a quarter or something like that. It's like, well, neither is right or wrong. It just depends on what you want. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is very few practice owners are like, no, I'm good. Let's just focus on profitability like that. There's something unique in that.
I think they really like the field that they have here, which it is really unique. And not to say talk down on any other practice. I think everyone tries to do their best with patient care. Their patients love them. They absolutely love them. They come back just to say hey and just drop off some food one day. And, they've been seeing the same doctor for the past 20 years for the same thing where they saw that doctor's father, who was also a physician at the practice. And he just has a little bit more of a
So you like legit found this opportunity on like a LinkedIn ad?
well, they put on Indeed. They just said, looking to start a PT practice. And I was like, all right, sure, I'll go talk to you guys. Why not?
That is just incredible. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's so incredible. Like
I wasn't
it's
planning on
like
leaving. I loved working with Wake Ortho. They were fantastic people and I had tons of autonomy and it worked out just perfectly. And
that is
I was
awesome.
like, all right, well, let me go talk to you guys and see what you had in mind and we'll go from there.
That is so cool, man. It's like you sort of like just it's like luck is probably not the right word, but you're perusing Indeed one day, an opportunity comes along. Hey, you want to build a clinic, and now you got like all the experience of like essentially the entrepreneurship side without the risk of it, which is
That's
amazing.
exactly what appealed to me
That's
because I'm a little risk averse as it is. And that's what always prevented me from doing a clinic was I'm like, I don't think I can front that kind of money and not have patience and try to fight this whole market. I'm like, this is actually ideal because I'd already been doing that essentially. I'd already opened two clinics with Wake Ortho, one in Garner and one in Apex. And we kind of just built that up on our own. So I'd already done parts of it anyway. And I peruse all the time because I mentor some new grads. So I'm like, oh, check out this one. Oh, maybe stay away from this one. Oh, keep an eye out. It's like, hey, maybe check on Indeed. So I'm not usually looking for other places to work, but I check every once in a while for them. And it was literally just right there. And I said, sure, why not? Let's go interview.
that is super neat, man. That is super neat. Um, Man, I like I don't know. It's just it's like so obvious now that we talk about like this model. It's like, man, I just hope somebody listening to this somewhere else in the country is like, hey, I know a PT at the
It's
local
just much
university or whatever.
simpler. I mean, it's
Yeah.
complicated in some ways. If they're not
Right,
used to
right,
having
right.
a PT group, there's obviously growing pains and things I've had to work on until we got to a certain point. And, I think I hold myself to a pretty high standard, even if they were not pushing me for numbers. When I was looking at numbers, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Are they going to come back and say, oh, maybe we're done? Because we're not hitting certain numbers at this point? And no one ever said that to me. I was on myself. That's a unique stressor that you don't think about. So
Well, this is going to be a bit of a backhanded compliment here as well. Again, I don't have any business relationship with you, but like a little backhanded compliment is like this is kind of similar to the model of like a lot of local restaurants, where sometimes you'll depending on it doesn't matter where you live, like sometimes you'll see a restaurant and be like, "Oh, that's so and so NFL player's restaurant." Well, actually, if you look at the deal, what it really is like there's an operator that's got a piece of this thing, and there's a marketing partnership where that NFL player owns a bit of it, but now publicly it's kind of like that's the relationship. And I don't mean that to like mean any disrespect to your partners or anything like that. I just mean that like this model clearly works in other industries, and here you've captured it in a way where you guys are doing that for in the healthcare industry. And so I don't know. I hope somebody else listening to this around the country is like, why don't we try this in Missouri?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely. And I
or let
think
me call
we try to
Eric and
look
see if
around and
his
see who
partners
you
want to do it
can.
here too. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah. Again, it's been fun. It's been stressful at times, as anything would be. Um, Probably my own stress more than anybody else's stress that I gave to myself. But at the same time, it's been a fun opportunity just to kind of work with them and kind of build this practice around them, and to the point where now we just have this relationship that we just walk by. I mean, they come back and they just mess around all the time. They come back and just check to see what we're doing, come by and talk to a patient, play a game, pick up a weight, something like that. So
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strata Stories. Strata PT is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.